Now my honor to introduce our keynote speaker, Vincent Dumazel. With 20 years experience in the food industry, Vincent is now Senior Advisor at the United Nations Global Compact on Oceans, as well as the Director for the Food Program for the Lloyd's Register Foundation. Vincent leads the charitable objectives of the foundation through the funding of innovative projects to drive safely in the food supply chain, partnering with the UN, FAO, the World Bank, WWF, universities, NGOs, and large brands. Vincent led and released the Seaweed Manifesto in a call to scale up the seaweed industry in order to address some of the world's most important challenges: hunger, global warming, pollution, and poverty. Vincent is now leading the Safe Seaweed Coalition, the first ever global platform for seaweed stakeholders, and is also part of the UN Food Systems Summit Organization for Seaweed, as well as the member of the EU expert panel to define and drive the algae strategy at the European Commission. Please welcome Vincent Dumazel.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here, and thanks a lot for this invitation. I'm going to share my screen, so you should be able to see that. Are you, or yeah, is it okay for you, Karen? I trust it's fine.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, it looks great. Thank you.
All good. So just to let you know, well, I'm in France right now, so quite a bit far away, and that's my main regret, actually, not to be with you here today. So I would really like to be with you in BC, and it's a great pleasure for me to be here. I'm not, as stated, I'm not a seaweed specialist initially as such. I moved to the seaweed topic because I was working in the food industry and trying to find ways to feed the world of tomorrow. And actually, we were running a short of solution. So, and then I realized that seaweed was very, very good news for all of us, and was maybe the greatest untapped resource we have. And so if you are craving for good news, and I think we are all craving for good news at the moment, I think seaweed is a very, very good news for all of us, because it has so much. So if you think of seaweed as being slimy, smelly, and unsexy, I think it's really time to get over it. And seaweed is much, much more than this. So I'm speaking on behalf of United Nations here as well. So I'm going to explain why it's so popular for United Nations, this seaweed story. So just before I get a bit more introduction about who I am and who is supporting this initiative and why we are doing this. A quick summary on why seaweed is so popular at the moment and why seaweed is a good news. First and foremost, because seaweed is a very, very good source of food. It is very, very healthy. I mean, we have lost track of eating seaweed. Actually, I think, in fact, if you think about it, I mean, from a civilization perspective, we moved out of prehistory back 12,000 years ago, when we stopped being hunters gatherers and we became farmers. But we never really became farmers in the ocean. So we are still hunters gatherers. We are fishing and collecting wild seaweed mostly. So we have still to get into the civilization of the ocean. So I think the idea is really to move to that civilization of the ocean and start to cultivate seaweed instead of collecting wild seaweed, which will put the resource at risk, because of course we are decreasing the remaining seaweed left wild. So I think that the first thing is really it's a huge source of sustainable food. Massive potential. There was a study saying that 2% of the ocean dedicated to seaweed production would be sufficient to feed 12 billion people, notably in protein. Seaweed is a nutritional bomb. It's full of protein. It's full of vitamin C, B12, polyunsaturated fatty acid, which are so critical to our health, and a lot of other good stuff that we cannot find anywhere else. In Japan, where they are very, very used to eat a lot of seaweed, they eat up to 10% of their meal as seaweed. But so we are still to understand that. We are still to understand what to do with this, and how to do that and get used to eat seaweed. And I think that's a very, very core topic, because we've realized all around the world that you can develop the seaweed market only if it's based on food. It has a lot of other applications, as we will see here, but food is really the keystone for the seaweed industry. So that's very important. And if you think about it in terms of figures, the ocean covers 70% of our planet and only contribute to 3% of our food today. When you think that already 1 billion people almost are starving to death today in the world, that we have an additional 300,000 people to feed every day on the planet compared to the previous day, and that the impact on the environment of our purely land-based food systems is so massive in terms of greenhouse gas, in terms of soil depletion, in terms of water scarcity. We need to move to the ocean. We need to develop food from the ocean. And seaweed is not only, so you may say that you are not into eating seaweed, but seaweed is not only a source of direct food. As mentioned, it should be seen also as a source of indirect food. It is a sustainable livestock feed, very, very sustainable, with a lot of very positive side effects. One of them being that it will boost the immune system of the livestock or of the fishes, if you are into aquaculture. So you can cut the use of antibiotics and decrease antibiotics use, which is decreasing the risk of antibioresistance, which is a major risk for all of us. Another very positive side effect when used as a source of feed is that it will cut methane emission, as it was stated before. It can cut methane emission up to 99%. There's a small seaweed called Asparaglopsis, which is not growing much in Canada, unfortunately. But if you put just 2% of this small seaweed in the meal of your animal, then you can cut methane emission by 99%. And when you think that methane emission is 8% of our greenhouse gas globally, then you realize that it's a big contribution. It can be a biostimulant for plants, boosting the resistance and of the plant and making them grow much faster. It is a very good source of carbon sequestration. If you think about it, this big seaweed that you have, the giant kelp, the macrocystis, they can grow up to 30 centimeters a day. So if you think about planting a tree, a tree will grow of 30 centimeters a year for the first year, maybe. A seaweed can grow up to 30 centimeters a day, and then this giant kelp, they can grow up to 60 meters high. So it's a massive source of carbon sequestration. And the good thing is that during their growth phase, 50% of the biomass of the seaweed, they are losing cells, just like we are losing skin cells all day long. They are losing some kind of skin cells as well, 50% of the total biomass, and it all goes into the ocean. It is, I mean, not all, but a large part of it goes into the ocean and is sunk into the ocean, down into the seabed, and it sequesters there. It's for millenniums. It does go back where it used to be in the deep sea, the ocean, and Megan from Ocean 2050 will introduce that in much more detail in a couple of days, I think. But that's a very, very massive source of mitigation of the global warming, because not only you cut emission, but also you take the carbon from the atmosphere and you send it back under the earth where it used to be. So that's very massive as a solution, growing seaweed, because that's the only way to take the carbon out of the carbon cycle. It will also absorb pollutants and provide life under the ocean. That's the basis of life in the ocean is related to seaweed. I mean, just like on Earth, when we start to develop agriculture and farming back 12,000 years ago, we did not start feeding animals, or we did not start with livestock. Actually, we start with crop production, and at some point we decided to use that crop production to feed livestock. But in the ocean, we have started the other way around. We decided to start aquaculture by feeding animals without taking care about what we feed them. So we ended up feeding animals with meat proteins from the land or soy products or soy meal, which is a nonsense. So we need to create a new ecosystem, a new integrated multi-trophic aquaculture, and you have some very, very good specialists of this in Canada, actually. So we have to develop that type of permaculture in the ocean in order to grow seaweed and in order to respect our environment and restore abundance in our ocean. And that's so important because co-location, growing seaweed along with shellfish, along with finfish, along with sea stars and so forth, will create a positive ecosystem, a regenerative ecosystem where we are only having an extractive ecosystem at the moment. So the other good thing of seaweed is to replace biopackaging. I don't know if you can see that here, but that's a plastic glass. It's made out of seaweed, and I could actually eat that glass after drinking the water inside. So you can use kelp for other type of things. I mean, this is a box made out of kelp. So it's very, very robust, very, very solid. I have some big piece of this here. So you can do building materials, you can do a lot of things. So it can replace a lot of, well, of course, it can solve the plastic problems and replace a lot of materials that we have. So it is very interesting. We are already eating seaweed 5 times a day because you have seaweed extract in each and every part of our food. I mean, as a texturing agent or gelling agent. There's a lot of vitamins and pharmaceuticals as well. So there's a lot. I mean, I'm not going to go into all the detail, but there's a lot of positive aspects of seaweed. And there's also an enormous growth potential for the sector. It is a new source of revenues for coastal community. Africa, we are bringing the seaweed revolution to Africa at the moment because Africa has such a huge, huge potential. There's a new farm which is built just right in front of Namibia. So the farm will produce tons and tons of resources and will absorb as much greenhouse gas than the entire emission of Netherlands, actually. So that's massive. And the good thing of this is that most of the job in these countries, in Africa and in Southeast Asia, is done by women. And they are holding leadership position and they are also delivering the job because it's they are fishermen's wife, actually. So as such, it contributes to gender parity and contribute to women empowerment. So once again, seaweed has so much different uses, so much different potential, and it's very hard to tell them all because first of all, we are still to discover most of them. The potential for medicines is absolutely fantastic as well. For instance, we will hear very soon about great news related to Alzheimer's disease. That can be could be created cured by seaweed extract as well. So there's a lot to discover, and when you think about it, once again, I mean, all the plants we have. I mean, the seaweed there are 3 main types of seaweed. You are talking a lot about kelp here, but there are 3 main types of seaweed: the red, the green, and the brown seaweed. The red seaweed are 2 billion years old, and then the green seaweed are about the same. And then only 500 million years ago, the green seaweed moved on land. And then they became all food, all plants are originally from these green seaweed. So these green seaweed, over the evolution, over the years, they have evolved in all the different type of plants we have on the planet. So all in all, just to summarize it, today, if you take a green seaweed, it is genetically much closer to an oak tree or to a strawberry than it is to a red seaweed. So that just to illustrate the wide potential about this seaweed. And once again, we don't know any of them. We are commercializing about 20 to 30 seaweeds at the moment out of 12,000. We are cultivating 7. So everything is to be understood and is still to be known about seaweed. We have an unlimited potential of innovation there, which is very, very good news. They're getting very quick because I think I'm a bit late. So what are we doing for that? So I'm just to remember you, UN Global Compact is the largest corporate sustainable initiative brought together by UN agencies. So I was sent by my company at the UN meeting last year in New York at the UN head office. It was a big meeting, and then I took the floor and I decided to voice that potential about seaweed, because I used to work with the likes of Nestle, Danone, and Cargill and Mars and Coca-Cola at CEO level, and none of them heard about seaweed and their fantastic potential. So I decided to voice that at the UN, and then it went quite viral. And people came to me and said, well, we need to do something. And UNGC was the first one. And they told me, we want you to work for us because we think seaweed as a momentum right now, which is why I'm now part of UN Global Compact. So we are really trying to address the SDGs, and it's the largest corporate sustainability initiative, once again. With UN Global Compact, with the Lloyd's Register Foundation, which is my other business, and with a lot of other stakeholders, we have launched the Seaweed Manifesto. Which is because we think that we need to tell the story right, and it needs to be a science-based story, because I mean, everything I told you about seaweed, we need to make sure it is science-based evidence to demonstrate that. So this manifesto that you have here, which is Seaweed Revolution, a manifesto for a sustainable future, which was released last June and presented at the UN General Assembly last September. I mean, we have developed it with Chinese and Japanese university, because they are the ones who know the best about most about seaweed. We have developed this with the Food and Agriculture Organization, the FAO, of course, the Nature Conservancy, the World Resource Institute, WWF, Cargill, Ocean 2050, and so much more. And in this manifesto, we decided to tell the story about seaweed. What is the potential? What are the barriers? And what are the call to action in order to really overcome that barriers, and what should we do for that? And that went very, very big. We went all around in the media. There was a lot of communication around this Seaweed Manifesto. We were the first one to be really amazed by this. It was downloaded thousands and thousands of times. You can, by the way, download it as well at seaweedmanifesto.com here. So yeah, it went very, very big. And we decided with the foundation to address some of the challenge of this manifesto. If you look at the main conclusion of this manifesto, the main barriers is that seaweed is totally immature and fragmented outside of Asia. It's an immature market. We are still in the Stone Age. And we are all working in isolation, meaning that you are funding in Canada things that are quite similar to what we are funding in Europe and what is funded by the US as well. So let's try to collaborate, let's try to work together. And if you are a small seaweed entrepreneur, I mean, you may have a hard time to get the information and to get places where to get the information, because there's no global organization for seaweed. There's no global platform that is existing. There's a lack of global standards as well, meaning that a big problem we have, I'm not sure about Canada, but I think it is the same. We have in US and in Europe is for instance, a very low tolerance for iodine residues in the seaweed, which prevent a lot of producers to put their seaweed on the market. So we do have a very low level of tolerance in the regulation in US and Europe. When you look at the regulation in Japan and in Korea and in China, the tolerance to iodine is 100 times higher than it is in our countries. Why is this? Ignorance is the best answer, I think. We still need to rationalize and streamline the regulation and the standards for seaweed. We need to have global standards. And that's a big problem, because it does prevent a lot of seaweed product to get into the market. And the same will apply for heavy metals and so forth, because we also have very scattered data. There's this very limited or inexistent collaboration will lead to a very scattered level of data. There's also a very limited environmental requirements, which is a big problem, because seaweed is mostly in people's minds is related to invasive species, is related to a very big concern like the sargassum tide we have in Caribbeans, like some other tide we have all around the world. People are very scared, and it's new. So people are scared about what is new. So there's a very low level of social acceptance. So the social licensing is very low, and the permitting from the national authority is very complex as well. Actually, seaweed may well be one of the most sustainable business in the world, but I think it will get easier. It is already easier to get a permitting to pump oil in the ocean than to cultivate seaweed at the moment, which is a big deal. And this is also mostly due to the lack of standards and requirements in terms of environmental regulation. There's a technology gap. It's very labor intensive at the moment. It's very, very labor intensive, even in Japan or China. We don't know where is the market. Problem of special planning, slow licensing processes, we named it, and the need for a dietary shift. We all need to become seaweed ambassadors and to change our diet and move to seaweed or seaweed-based product or seaweed-fed product if we want the world to change. Based on this, we decided to act with the foundation, with the UN Global Compact on 5 points: global collaboration, harmonized standards, environmental safety, scientific research, and coordinated investment. And to do that, the first thing was to launch a global platform, a global place to bring together these people. Because if we can save the world with seaweed, we can enable the seaweed revolution only if we get together. So we launched in partnership with the Financial Times last week the Safe Seaweed Coalition, which is fully funded. It's a £5 million funding from Lloyd's Register Foundation to support the creation of a coalition that will work initially on 3 different topics: consumer safety, environmental safety, occupational safety, define standards and global consistency for these 3 different topics. So out of the £4 million, 80% of them will be distributed to projects in order to support these different safety aspects. Why safety? Because seaweed is also very competitive. There's so much potential. People are quite reluctant to collaborate. And the best way to convince people is really to talk about safety. Safety has a very strong convening power, because you may say that your product is cheaper, is better, it is more sustainable, it is more organic, but you will never say my product is safer than my competitor's product, because you don't want your product to be related to something unsafe or to compare with something unsafe. So you don't compete on safety. It's a pre-competitive topic, which is why we have decided with this coalition to first focus on this safety topic. In order to drive this coalition, we have defined a global governance, which is illustrated here. So you see that we have people from all over the world. The Cape Breton University in Canada is representing proudly Canada. We have people from Asia, from South America, from Australia. We have mostly, I would say, large large organizations. So we have FAO as part of the steering committee, Australia Steering Association, Korean Nori Association, Sea Grant in the US, Nestle, Rican Food, Sintef in Norway, WWF, and so forth. So we have a very, very wide governance group of people who is very active. The European Commission as well is part of us. So it is a global coalition, and really want to be we would really like to welcome as much seaweed stakeholders as we could. We need members. We need as much members. So membership is totally free. It's fully paid by the foundation anyway, all this initiative. So membership is free. We really need to bring this community and build a global community to really make the market tomorrow. So in order to do that, we will rely on a secretariat. That's 5 main people in the secretariat. No need to be long on that, but yeah, being part of the secretariat, and we will, in order to define the priorities of our coalition, we are going through a process of roundtable discussions. Ideally, we would have liked to organize a big event and gather 2,000 people in one place, but that will not be possible for quite a while. So in the meantime, we have decided to organize roundtable discussion by a group of 15. So in order to decide what will we do with this $3 million of investment that will be used by the coalition to support projects. So we have shared seaweed coalition, safe seaweed coalition members. So anyone who is registered in the coalition can apply to join this roundtable discussion. We have experts, we have UN organization, or we are organizing on various topics that you can see on the right. We are organizing discussions, and based on this, we will define call for proposal over the next 2 years in order to support actively project. And because we have an ambition to leverage, we would really like to I mean, this project will not be 3 million, but it should be 12 to 15 million at the end of the day. So, so yeah, my main call to action is join the coalition. You see that you have here a global map which is existing right now of the seaweed stakeholders that are members of the coalition. So the idea it's quite an old one. There's much more dots at the moment. So we are really trying to get a global mapping of the seaweed stakeholders. Who is interested to buy? Who is interested to sell? Who is interested to invest? I mean, a lot of investors are coming to us saying, I want to do impact investment in seaweed. How can I do that? We want to be a source of answer for them. We want to be a source of guidance for them. We need investment. We need research. We need to make sure that we don't duplicate research, that there's a great level of collaboration. So, and the first stage is really to get into that. So safeseaweedcoalition.org, get registered there if you are into seaweed already. And that's really the first thing to do in order to be part of the discussion. And then there will be newsletters, there will be discussion, this roundtable discussion. And obviously, at the end of the day, we expect to have an annual event gathering all our members. I think we already have over 300 members who joined the coalition over the last months. And there's new members all the time, because once again, it can only be all together if we want to make a difference. Seaweed has clearly an untapped potential, and we need to get together. There's no other way. The last slide that I would like to show is a bit different, to not focusing specifically on seaweed, but just to say that it has been a very tough time for everyone these last 12 months, but I think the world is full of solutions. If you step back and look at the world, how it is going for the last 200 years, it is getting better and better, way better. And even in the last 50 years, if you look at extreme poverty or starvation, I mean, back 40 years ago, 40% of the population used to starve to death. We only have 9% now, while we move from 5 billion to 7.5 billion people. Life expectancy keeps growing all around the world. Gender parity keeps growing all around the world. Illiteracy rate is crumbling. It moved in 50 years from 80% to 20%. Even the number of deaths in natural catastrophe is crumbling as well. And I mean, okay, we just in a very difficult pandemic right now, but 9 months to find 5 vaccines, while it took years and years and years for the previous pandemic. I mean, collaboration is the source of everything, and the world is full of good news. So all together, and it can only be all together, we want to be remembered as the first generation on this planet who managed to feed the entire world with safe and sustainable food, while mitigating the impact on the resources that we have, and building a safer world for everyone. So that's what we call the seaweed revolution. There was a scribe who made a nice summary of my action last week. So I'm sharing that with you. You have my detail here. The call to action is really join us and get seaweed in your life every day, and join the revolution. We'll be glad to have you on board. It's a very, very good news for all of us, seaweed.
The seaweed revolution. I love it. I'm part of the seaweed revolution, Vincent. I own a magazine called Edible Vancouver Island Magazine, and as a revolutionarist myself, we cover seaweed, and there is an incredibly delicious recipe in here. If anybody wants it, message me. Seaweed fritters. They are delicious. If anybody wants the recipe, message me. Speaking of messages, I want everyone to go to our chat, because Vincent, you are, first of all, thank you so much. That was That was just incredible. I cannot believe how much work is being done, and the information you shared was so easy to understand, and you just did an amazing job. But also thank you for your passion and your positivity. The world is getting better. I love that. We don't always think that when we watch the news, but it really is. And I think that the work that you're doing and the inspiration that you're infusing onto the planet will only increase not only our ability to do more good work, but our feeling of optimism for the future. So thank you. Now, I inspire and encourage you to ask some questions, because having an opportunity to speak to someone like Vincent, who has his education experience, is just such a gift. So I'm going to turn over the next section of this morning to the amazing Erin Bremner Mitchell, who is part of Cascadia. She is going to be making sure that all these questions come in, and that Vincent can answer some of them. So there you go, Erin. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen. Good day, everybody. And thank you, Vincent. Thank you so much for ending on such a positive note. We did get a couple of comments in the chat sending along that those thanks for such a positive ending. Thank you so much for that. So we do have some questions coming in on the chat, and feel free to keep them coming, folks. I'm here to read them out and give Vincent an opportunity to address those questions for you. And Vincent, I'm hungry now. You started off talking about food, and now I'm hungry. So on the food note, what's your favorite way to eat seaweed?
That's a good question, right? I like eating seaweed. There's so many different ways, actually, with lentils, and I like pancakes with kelp. It's very nice with Saccharina latissima. Well, there's so many ways. You know, I was with we had a UN Food System Summit on seaweed back 2 weeks ago with a 3-star Michelin chef who is cooking seaweed, and he was telling us he's cooking 25 different types of seaweed. He has been awarded best chef in the world last year by the Michelin Guide, and he's based in France. He's from Argentina, and yeah, 25 different types of seaweed, and he's growing them next to his restaurant now because he wants to have them as fresh as possible. I mean, some of them at least. But there's so many different tastes, so many different flavors. That's the thing, and it contains the glutamate, or the umami, as it's said by, which is a new taste as such. So it's just fantastic. You need time to understand how to cook that. That's the problem. It's a bit different. And it's a new taste, so you need to get used to it. But once you get used to it, it's really fantastic. And I put that, I mean, the condiment on most of my salads, but yeah, I'm not a very good cook, actually, which is a shame for a French. But yeah, and you know, and that's funny because that's something that we have lost. Actually, we have lost because, I mean, the oldest trace of seaweed where are 14,000 years old, and they are down in the south of Chile, which has revealed the real ways that people settled in America, because Sapiens has never been to America. And initially we were thinking about the Clovis route, you know, these people moving through the, not very far from where you are, Bering 13,000 years ago. And then we realized that there was some traces of human beings which were way older than these, and they were all eating seaweed. And we questioned why, and why we have no trace of this, why we have no remaining of these people up north. And then we realized that we have no remainings of them because they were following the coast, what is known as a kelp highway, you know. So the first settlers in America, they all followed the kelp highway. Why? Because they were eating seaweed. I mean, it may have been pleasant to archaeologists, who are mostly male, to think that, yeah, I mean, we are what we are because we were hunting mammoths while women and kids were down in the cavern. But the truth is not there. The truth is that we were just collecting weakling seaweed and small fishes, and that's why we are what we are. And which is demonstrated by the way human beings settled to America. And actually, our brain is our brain only because we had to eat a lot of polyunsaturated fatty acid during our evolution, and they come only from seaweed. So we are what we are because we had a lot of seaweed, and we lost that tradition. We lost that contact with the ocean back 2,000 years ago, and with the Romans and so forth. And then we have to recover it. And I think, especially in Canada, which is where you have some amazing pioneers in the world of seaweed. 40 years ago, they started some amazing job, and if we are there, if the manifesto is there, everything there, it is because of them. So there were some very, very strong pioneers in Canada. So it's very important that you continue this effort.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And for the history too, that's marvelous. It seems that your plastic cup attracted some attention. We have a question from Norm. What needs to happen to scale up the use of seaweed for packaging and containers to replace plastic?
Yeah, what needs to is a chicken and egg actually at the moment. So we had a very nice call like this roundtable discussion a couple of weeks ago with Nestle and the seaweed-based material producers. And Nestle was like, well, we need big volume if we want to shift to plastic, to seaweed bio-based plastics. And so it's like, yeah, you need big volume, but you don't want to invest. And on the other hand, the producers, they need a major investment or major commitment if they want to create big volumes, and then it goes back to the supply because you need a lot of seaweed. So I think it's a lot about, first of all, the main problem is understanding how to get the extract, the polymer extract. We are not very mature on that. We are not very cost efficient. So we need to be much more cost efficient on getting the polymer out of seaweed and create this kind of plastic, which is a bit too expensive. There's a problem of standards as well. Typically in Europe, you cannot put that on the market because there's no regulation for seaweed-based packaging. So this is food, actually. It is not packaging, it is food. Then you can put that on the market. But that's a problem because, I mean, so we need to have, I'm not sure about the situation in Canada or in the US, but we need to have a clear regulation on seaweed-based packaging. We need to have a clear regulation on compostability. What does that mean? Because everybody claims they are compostable or they are biodegradable. What does that mean exactly? There's no clear standards. And once again, if you want to incentivize people to get into that, we need clear standards and clear regulation. So it's only a question of regulation and a bit of technology gap that are not there. But there are some fantastic company, like there's one called Notpla, Notpla, which is producing edible bubble of water. You know, they supply the London Marathon and you swallow it all, the bubble of seaweed and the water inside, and that replaces the plastic glass. So there's some fantastic project going on. Lollyware in the US, they have replaced the plastic straw by a seaweed-based straw, for instance, and so forth and so on. But still, there's a technological gap, a regulatory gap as well, and some question about chicken and egg, who comes first, the offer or the demand?
Notpla is actually presenting during Seaweed Days, Sunday morning at
Good.
10 o'clock. Yes, so if you're interested in that plastic conversation, do join us back on Sunday.
Exactly, but they are the best one to answer the question.
Excellent, great. A question following up on that one from Bill. How do we convince our political leaders to invest in the ocean science necessary to maximize the seaweed opportunity?
Well, I think we need to tell the story right first. I mean, I come from France, with the second largest maritime territory in the world, who has a huge biodiversity of seaweed, quite a good history, good scientists, and that's nowhere in the agenda. And I'm meeting with the French minister for the ocean actually on this week. But yeah, I mean, you need to tell the story, which is why we did this manifesto, because we need to have something very, very short, clear about this, but what is the potential, and we need to tell them the story. I think and then we have to articulate that and make sure that once again the licensing process and we have clear environmental requirements to secure them, because the last things they want to hear. I mean, if I take once again the example of France, I mean, we are struggling with green seaweed tides or with sargassum tides in Caribbean. And then, I mean, when you talk about cultivating seaweed, you're like, whoa. So you need to convince them, you need to demonstrate that there's no harm, that most of these seaweed tides are coming from wilds, and all these seaweed tides actually are coming from wild seaweed. As soon as the seaweed cultivation is properly managed, there's no risk. There's no risk of invasivity as long as these local species and so forth. So you need to demonstrate that, and you need to position, you need to educate them. I think that's the problem. You need to educate them.
So because time is not on our side, on the planet's side, how can small independent farmers make a go of this, even though there's not larger investments coming from levels of government?
Well, that's very difficult for small farmers, and that's also why we have created this coalition, so that small farmers can convert, can go quickly, can get access to the information. Because I mean, seaweed cultivation is not, it's not an easy task. I mean, you need to understand, you need to get the seeding, you need to get the ropes and how to do it and so forth. So we need to support that. But the good thing is that in terms of capex, it's very low. And that's why it's so important for Africa. Because I mean, in Africa, you don't, especially because in Africa, you don't need the drying device. You don't need anything to dry the seaweed. I mean, you can just leave them on the beach and they will dry. And once they are dried, you can keep them for months almost. So that's fine. I mean, they will not get, I mean, they will still stay very good. And the good thing, by the way, on seaweed that I have not mentioned is that they keep all their natural properties even when dried, which is a bit strange for us because we think like the fresher it is, the better it is. But no, for seaweed, it's not. I mean, dry them. Seaweed are so resistant because they can grow in the ice, they can grow in the sun, they can resist to very salty atmosphere. They are very resistant. Their structure is very resistant. So you can dry them. They will keep all their nutriments, all their properties. They will be just as good. In Japan, you will never find any fresh seaweed. That doesn't make sense for it. It's a difficulty. So anyway, it's a very interesting source for small-scale producers. So I think here again, it's a question of education and training. And I think now with this remote training potential, and we have a lot of about training, we need to train these people. There is an interesting initiative called Green Wave in the US, which should be operating, I think, in Canada. Brent Smith, fantastic, is trying to convert fishermen into seaweed or at least permaculture growers. And that's the type of things that we need to do. I mean, train them, develop skills, build capacities.
This is an interesting topic. Somebody's asking, Linda's asking, what strategies can we use to keep the seaweed industry positive? And I think you're answering these questions as we go here. It's about telling the story and talking about the benefits.
And I think there's something to do for all of us as well. I mean, we need to support that industry as well in our daily life. Each time we eat and we drink, we are seaweed activists. We are environmental activists. I mean, we shape the world each time we decide to eat or to drink something. I mean, these food brands, regulate. I mean, especially the food brands, they are listening to us. And 4 times a day, you really shape the world you want. So I think the first thing is let's try it. Let's build the market, because once again, if we don't have a food market, it will be very complicated to build a resilient and sustainable seaweed industry if we don't have a food market at the center of this one. So I think that's our key message and our take-home message, to I mean, make our choice, make our daily choice, and try to use seaweed. You can find it in many stores now, so quite easy.
I think that's a really great way to wrap it up. Vincent, we're close on time, but there are so many questions coming in. I'm going to save this chat and I will probably send you a long email with all of these questions, and hopefully we can get these answered and posted up on some of our social media platforms or even the Seaweed Days website. So
that's fine. I'm just sharing the Safe Seaweed Coalition, because that's what is, if you have still questions, that's the best way to address them is to drop them. Not drop us or not. So that's it. So do not hesitate to get there.
Amazing, Vincent. I'm so inspired. I'm ready to go run or do an electric bike or something like that, because I'm just so motivated by your speak. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Go for the seaweed revolution all together.
That's right. Over to you very much.
And thanks a lot to Cascadia Seaweed and to everyone for this great event.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron and Vincent. That's all the time we have for questions, but we really want to encourage you to continue to send the questions in, and we will get back to you. There's lots going on throughout the week. If you want more information on Seaweed Festival, go to our website and get all the goodies. I want to also thank Vincent for coming to us from the UK. I think it's around 6:20 there right now. Is that right? 6:15 in the evening. So thank you so much. It was a very thought-provoking and inspiring opening keynote, Vincent.
You're welcome. I'm in France. It's 7:30 here. So
it's 7:30. How was today? Was it a good day for us? Thanks so much. I also want to thank the Vancouver Island Economic Alliance once again for sponsoring and hosting the Industry Speaker Series.